Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just violent bass.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who once got into serious legal trouble for sneaking onto a NASA space shuttle and replacing a test monkey on a 7-year voyage across the universe, Mr. Ryan Siebold!
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
Not bad, not bad. 7 years in space, man. That must have been something.
Well, it brought me right back here to you. A little space madness is good for a podcast, I think. We're doing okay. I'm just trying to keep up with old Jeff Bezos. Gonna meet him up there. We got a little cocktail party planned. Me, him, and his brother. And, I'm doing what I can.
I feel like you should also sort of make it up to that test monkey, because you don't know that back here on Earth, that monkey has been interviewed time and time again about how screwed over he feels. Like that was his ticket towards stardom and you ripped it from his hands. And so now he carries a vengeance. I'm surprised you haven't had threats against your life.
Oh, I have. Have you met this monkey, though? He is a jerk. Look, his name's Steve.
Oh, yeah, he's an asshole, dude.
His name's Steve, and this guy, he and I have had it in for each other for a long time. I make some protein shakes, right? I've been doing things for my body, and I bought some bananas. I didn't know he was going for the same bananas as me at the grocery store, and I took the cluster he was after. That was great. It was ripe. They were good-ass bananas, in all fairness. But this monkey was, just held a grudge. And so he and I have been just kind of going at it until now, where I took his spot. And he's a little peeved, but fuck him.
I mean, rightfully so, though. I mean, I'd be pissed if you took my spot on a NASA space shuttle, dude. I've been working my whole life for that. And I mean, we've seen his training videos, dude. That monkey got yoked, homie. I am honestly surprised. I think you had to steal it from him, because between you and me, dude, I love you to death. I got your back. That monkey would have kicked your ass in a one-on-one, dude. I'm sorry to say.
Well,
that
right.
guy was
so
ripped.
That's where it all started, was at the gym. So I think he was using the bananas in his protein shakes the same way that I was. And
this is starting to become clear. So you guys just kind of had a series. First it was just the bananas. Then next thing you guys know, you're going to the same gym and you're trying to use the same equipment. Dude, you know what's funny?
Series of things.
You know what's funny about that story, though? It always ends the same way, which is that you guys just don't realize how similar to each other you really are, and how you'd be the best of friends if you could just come to give each other a chance.
Yeah, like Swayze and Demi Moore, we just need to make some pottery together and come together. Little monkey paws on his vase, and then I come behind him as the big spoon, and we come together that way. Maybe that's the end of our story arc. We'll see how it plays out. For right now, though, we got a movie to talk about, my friend. Are you ready to talk about The Void from 2017?
I am ready to talk, yes, sir, because I have things to say. Why don't you go ahead and break it down with a description for our listeners first?
All right, from directors, plural, Jeremy Gillespie and Stephen Kotansky. This is when described on IMDb as when Sheriff Deputy Carter discovers a blood-soaked man limping down a deserted road. He rushes him to a local hospital with bare-bones night shift staff. As cloaked cult-like figures surround the building, the patients and staff inside start to turn ravenously insane. Trying to protect the survivors, Carter leads them into the depths of the hospital, where they discover a gateway to immense evil. Jason, what did you think about this movie?
As always, my friend, I'm going to be happy to discuss with you right after we listen to this trailer for The Void.
I can see it all before me.
You won't get far.
this guy.
Give you a copy of Code 3 and I need assist.
Daniel?
Who are they?
There is something calling them all here. I've seen this place before.
Everything has led to this. You will become something remarkable.
They did killings and sacrifices. They made people change.
Nothing else matters now.
This isn't the end.
Statistically, you're more likely to die in a hospital than anywhere else.
All right, Ryan, so before we get into this, there's really a couple things that I want to get out of the way, okay? First of all, that trailer is amazing. And I wish that my experience with the film more closely resembled the experience I thought I was going to get after watching that trailer. So props to the editors or the production team, whoever it was responsible for that amazing trailer for what I'm going to go ahead and say was not necessarily an amazing film. We'll go into that more here.
This movie is a Cheesecake Factory menu of pros and cons, and there is a lot
Which
to
is
like
extensive, right? I mean, those menus like are 27 pages long.
Right. Anyone that's been to a Cheesecake Factory, bring your readers, because you're gonna be sitting there for a minute. Yeah, this is a pros and cons list of immense size and girth. There's a lot to like about this movie. There really is. It's they gave it a good solid go, and you could tell what they were going for. It is an ambitious film. Kudos to them for shooting their shot. Look, it's like the drunk guy in the bar with the hot girl, and you're a 3, and she's an 8.5, and you just go for it. And that's what they did. These guys, these directors, were the 3.5. The things they were trying to do with this movie were the hot girl in the bar at 2 a.m., and they shot their shot, and they missed. They didn't get to go home with the girl, but, they tried. And as their friends, I give them a hug and say, you tried, buddy. Let's just go home and try again tomorrow.
But I will say there wasn't like a complete whiff. Like they at least were able to get like, I don't know, like a kiss on the cheek or a pet. Like it wasn't like a complete absolute, like, go screw yourself type of response.
Maybe even a handy in the men's room. I don't know.
Maybe they let him cup breast.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, something happened here. There's something, there's a lot to like. I don't regret watching it. Again, this is just one of those films that I wouldn't recommend to anybody. Funny thing is, this is kind of it's interesting that we're following The Endless, because to me, it's the exact opposite of that, wherein they kind of knocked it out of the park on the sights and sounds and the effects and all the things that The Endless kind of laid up and made par on, but they fell short, like way short, on plot, character depth, and all the things that The Endless knocked it out of the park on. I feel like The Endless is a much stronger movie for it, and so it really teaches you what's the most important thing here. Is it the monsters, the creature effects? You throw all this shit into what looks cool, and that's cool, and it's fun, to watch all that. But at the end of the day, by the time you're into the third act, you just stop giving a shit about what the fuck is going on. And that it's unfortunate, because that's when this movie goes apeshit bananas and cranks it to 11, but you don't care. And so it's really, really weird, I don't know.
And we'll go ahead and get into like more of the reasons specifically on that.
Definitely.
The other thing I will say too, just before we really get into it here, is that, again, if you listen to us regularly, you know that we generally will play the movie clips alongside the episodes. We're not going to have any clips for you There were none available on the old YouTube. They did have the movie available, but sorry guys, I was not going to go through an hour and a half and trim out a couple minutes here and there. I was going to ask Ryan too, like we're just, maybe for a different movie, not for this one.
As the editor of this podcast, I thank you, Jason, because I would have been the one stuck with the bill.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that to you, buddy. Here. Now, the other thing too, I will let our listeners know if you do want to go ahead and check out this movie. And again, it doesn't sound like either of us are prepared to give this like our full-on recommendation, but it may be a movie that you should at least check out if you do like kind of cosmic horror-y stuff, especially if you go to YouTube, because it turns out it's available for free on YouTube. There's
I know,
like 2
and
different
fuck my life because I
high-quality
paid for
files.
this movie.
Same here, dude. I went to Amazon, I paid my $4 or whatever, and then as I was looking up the clips afterwards, I was like, God damn it, this movie's right here. Ugh.
I know. Hey,
in HD.
In all fairness, just keeping everything on the level, there are a lot of people that like this movie. If you pull up reviews,
there are absolutely.
There's a considerable amount of people that appreciate it for what it is. The bloody disgustings of the world, or the gore hounds, and people that are into the creature effects and the blood and the monsters and the.
Okay, but I'm into those things.
All of that.
It's not. Both of us are. We sat here and like sucked Dead Alive's dick for an hour and a half because of its creature effects and gore.
And that's fair. But I did like this movie on that level. I mean, when we got to those parts of this film, I actually did appreciate those moments for what they were. Now, in the context of the entire film, as I said before, I just stopped giving a shit. But that doesn't mean I wasn't having fun after I let go of the fact that I didn't care about any of the characters or anything. Yeah. I enjoyed it for what it was. I was just hoping for a little more, especially following such bangers as Dead Alive and The Endless and Under the Skin. And we were on such a roll, and then, we kind of got to this. So anyway.
That's fine. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's actually like really get into this. So
Yeah, do it.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to start, Ryan, where?
At the beginning.
Absolutely. So when this film opens, we're in the entryway of an old house. Now, the inside is dimly lit, but there's light peering through a window, and it exposes dulled, dusty floorboards and paint-chipped walls, as well as a pair of blood-soaked legs. Now, we hear a woman scream outside. The camera floats urgently away from the legs toward the front door, which is closed, but features a large black triangle, which we immediately know that we're going to see again. Suddenly, from inside the house, a young man flings the door open and runs forth into the night sky, which wraps up our opening shot for The Void. Now, immediately after that, there's a girl. She runs after this guy from inside. She follows the guy out and pretty much immediately gets shot. And that young guy, and there's a young guy outside, he douses this girl with gas, and then there's like this sort of, elderly father figure, uncle, what have you. He lights a cigarette and drops it on her. And right before we go to the credits sequence, which was actually pretty interesting, is where we see our guy in a white robe, right? This sort of cult member that's going to keep popping up in different respects and volumes over the course of this movie. So, Ryan, I will tell you, I actually did really like the credits sequence. It was, pretty simple and effective. A lot of nice photography, a lot of sort of black and purple and green, which is kind of that inherent aesthetic that a lot of people bring to cosmic horror when you're talking about elder gods of the universe and inner dimensions. You get those like purples and greens and blacks and, portals in space and all that sort of shit that I love. And very, very soon after that, we're introduced to our protagonist. Now, he's a small town cop, and his name is Daniel. Ryan, I would like to just know high level, what did you think of our protagonist, Daniel?
Inconsistent for starters. I thought he was like a pushover cop. Really weird to see, especially in this political and cultural climate.
These aren't the cops we're familiar with.
This cop is so agreeable. Like, give me your gun. He's like, okay. Like, whoa, you can just do that? I didn't know you could ask. I never really tried it before, but certainly want to try that now. Give me your badge and gun, sir. And he's just like, all right, you got me. You got the
shucks, okay.
Right, yeah. And then, there was some ham-fisted exposition that they dumped right up front about his baby and all of this. And it just felt a little, what is it, Jason? Ham-fisted right up front.
Ham-fisted. You're welcome, Javon, who I know is listening.
Yeah. Our friend of the show, Javon, is well educated in the legend.
Go back and listen to the Born on the 4th of July episode, listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, I just, I was in, I mean, whatever. The movie had just started. We're like, 10 minutes in at this point. Also, I will say it's a pretty short film. We didn't mention that. I think it's only an hour and a half.
Yeah, solid 90 minutes.
In all fairness, it scooted right along. It didn't really drag. And we get into some shit, like you said, in the opening sequence. And then it doesn't take too long, before it really kind of lays it on you and shows you where you're at. But, chalk that up in the pros column, I guess.
Definitely. So here's the thing, Ryan, is, I generally agree with you. I really didn't like this guy. I thought he was pretty unlikable. He's kind of like whiny and even like overly defensive. And I think part of it, too, is just they didn't really give him, or really any of the characters for that matter, the best dialogue to work with. There's a lot of like clunky drops with regard to like info where it's like, you better be careful. Most people don't respond well to losing a kid, and then they'll just like walk away from it, and that's it. It's like, I really feel like that should have been gone into a little bit more.
Right.
Or like,
I definitely agree. Yeah. Everything was so matter of fact. Like,
they just.
And then here's the thing too,
there,
Jason, is that in this, so the opening sequence happens, and then we're in this hospital where they've taken this kid or whatnot, and he gets dropped off.
So let's hold on, back up real quick. So the kid that you're talking about is basically this cop is outside. We see him. He's on patrol in front of like a cornfield, and then this dude staggers out. He thinks he's just like a drunkard or so some kid who's a little bit hammered or something, and then he ends up being like almost completely incoherent as well as covered in blood. So our protagonist Daniel picks him up and takes him to a local hospital. So go ahead.
Right. Sorry about that. I missed that. I left that out. Doesn't matter. At the end, we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, it only matters to further prove my bitching about this film. We find out this kid is, we recognize him, or I recognized him as the kid from the opening sequence, right? Like that's the guy that was running away when the girl got shot.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Uh-huh. Correct.
Right. So we go in the hospital after he gets dropped off, and we get introduced to all our characters, our ragtag group of people that we're going to be with for the rest of the film. And I'll let you introduce those, and we'll talk about that shortly. But I will say going into this that as we get introduced to these people, to prove your point that you just brought up, there are a litany of things that are just nonchalantly dropped. And it's so... it's just skipping around like a CD with a scratch on it that I just couldn't really pick up they were just giving me so many little nuggets without really settling in or like layering anything that it just felt like I didn't know what was important or what wasn't. The foreshadowing was a little off. And I'm trying to get to know these people, knowing full well that I'm probably going to be with them for a while, and I should probably care about them as they, some of them are probably not going to be with us or whatnot. And I just didn't. I didn't know. I was so confused by the time the shit started to hit the fan, 10, 15 minutes after this, that, and they continued throughout the film in all three acts to continue to like, and then also this. So, basically this film felt like a 5-year-old. Have you ever had a 5-year-old try to tell you a story and they're just like leaving out important notes and then going back to fill it in? And and then the one guy was a clown. And you're like, well, you probably should have led with that. And then
5-year-old,
the one guy,
come on.
He crashed his motorcycle. And you're like, oh, he's on a motorcycle now? Yeah, he's on a motorcycle. It's like, Jesus Christ, can you shut up? And so that's The Void 2017. Ta-da!
Hey! Now, the funny thing, too, is I don't know how you felt about this, but I was actually reminded of a certain nomenclature that you invoked during our Dagon episode regarding the actress. And literally the entire movie, for like 87 of the 90 minutes, all I could think about watching Daniel, the protagonist, was how he was Kirkland brand Kieran Culkin. The entire time, it was like they wanted Kieran Culkin clearly for this role, and they couldn't afford him. And they were like, "Who's not even the next best thing, but like who is somewhat like him that we can afford?" And they settled on whoever the hell this guy was. But I mean, like even down to like the way his hair's parted and shit. Because I was just watching what's the Succession?
Succession,
and it was like he totally looks like Roman, from that show. So. So from here on out, Daniel will also be called Kirkland Brand Kieran Culkin.
Well, I mean, everyone in this film is good value somebody, and then this film is good value John Carpenter or Clive Barker. So, everything is just trying to live up to something else that's done it better. There's a better version of everything and everybody in this film. Look, they did the best they could with what they had to work with. I really do believe that it's the script. I think that it all comes down to the script. I think the script suffered, and they put all their money into the gore and the effects and the creature effects, which were good for all intents and purposes. That's the pros column. I enjoyed the creature effects. But without a good script or any character design, all it ever did was make me wish I was watching Lord of Illusions or In the Mouth of Madness, which did this much better on all levels with the cult thing in Lord of Illusions. I fucking love Now, I haven't seen it in many years. I don't know if it holds up. But In the Mouth of Madness, kind of a similar deal. But anyway.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's kind of, again, walk through a little bit of this.
Rein it back in. Sorry.
Yeah. So, by the way, it should be mentioned that, so this kid that they end up bringing in, that's, supposedly the guy that's escaped from the house at the beginning, the doctor inspects him, and he's got, like, track marks on his arm, right? Like he's a heroin user or something. So they admit him into the hospital, and, he's kind of in this group with, I guess we've got, the pregnant chick and the grandpa. We've got the two nurses, one of whom is like the wife of the guy Daniel. We've got the
cop, the main character.
We've got the Asian girl who's like the nurse in training. And then there's a couple other people that are going to show up as well. In sort of, again, sort of really clunky ways. Like, to your point, everything just sort of happens in this movie. And I think that it probably made a lot of sense on the back end, but that maybe the right information wasn't necessarily communicated. I don't know. Let's see as we kind of walk through this. So basically what really kicks things off is, once everyone's admitted, and, this girl Beverly, she's the second nurse, she's basically going and checking on this guy who's already there. And there's a little weird exchange, and then we see Daniel, and he wanders off, and then we see the nurse, like, stabbing the dude in the eye all of a sudden. And that just sort of came out of nowhere. I didn't really seem to have any sort of, like, setup, and I was sort of wondering, like, was it supposed to be, like, Daniel brought some sort of evil in with him, or, like, was it the kid? But, like, why that all of a sudden started happening, I wasn't exactly certain. Because I think that the threat was still outside, but so that again was unclear. And then
stuff sort of happened in this movie without any motivation or explanation, and it's leaving you as the viewer to figure it out. Like, I felt like it was on me or that I was missing something. But then when you go back and really start to break it apart, no, I didn't miss anything. You just didn't give it to me. So now I'm left to fill in the gaps on my own. But then they go back later in the film and start to fill in some of these gaps as if it was like, oh, stick with it, we'll tell you later. And some movies have done that successfully. So, you could have plot twists. You could have, oh, we'll tell you later, and you just have to watch it. But this did it unsuccessfully, wherein by the time they told me, I didn't care anymore.
Well, because to do that effectively, you've really, this is where elements of, foreshadowing and all of that, sort of artsy intellectual approaches to storytelling and structure and all of those things come into play, and you do have to lead breadcrumbs, you have to allude to things and refer to them. If you just drop something and never refer to it again and you didn't set it up beginning, then it's pointless, right? Don't bring it up. Don't make it a part of things. Just leave it out, I think that's one of the pratfalls of indie filmmaking is that, and I think this is true of anybody who's just starting out. I think anytime you're on a sort of beginner or amateur level, part of the reason that your material isn't as strong as it may be later is because I think that, there's this element of let's throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And I think even that comes from a place of like not being confident necessarily in your storytelling, right? And because, I mean, you know, I've done some different storytelling. I have my book and all these sort of different things. And yeah, I remember, like, you know, I'm thinking of like my book specifically, and it was like, I'm going to put in all this stuff. And then, you know, I'll also put in this, because that way if somebody doesn't like this, there's this. And then before you know it, you just have all these sort of ideas that are stacked on one another without necessarily getting like the room and space to be explored that they deserve. And again, I think that comes from, you know, a lack of experience and a lack of confidence. Whereas, you know, later on in, you know, it's also just like comedy too, right? It's like, you know, you can throw like a million different jokes at the wall and hopefully one or two of them are funny, or you can like really work to construct like, you know, 5 to 7 solid jokes, you know, over the course of like a minute and a half to 2 minutes or something. So
Right.
I think that was kind of one, like I said, you know, this being an indie film, amateur filmmakers, beginner filmmakers, they just tried to do too much. And to your point earlier, they really did bite off more than they can chew. I mean, you kind of have to know, like, you can't be telling interdimensional space monster stories and shit, you know, with your $50,000 budget. And I know they ended up getting more from Indiegogo campaign, which we can talk about later, but yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you did any deep dive on these cats that made this film, but Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kotansky are basically creature effects design and art department guys. So they're not story guys, and they leaned into what they knew, and that's why that succeeded. They have worked with Guillermo del Toro, doing movies like Pacific Rim and Shape of Water, and they came together on, of all things, ironically, the terribly received David Ayer's The Suicide Squad, not to be confused with James Gunn's Suicide Squad. So they were literally working on The Suicide Squad by David Ayer, the first one, and they decided that, I guess upstairs, they knew Guillermo from previous films that they had collaborated on him with, and he was upstairs doing some, at Pinewood Studios, I believe, doing some stuff for the failed H.P. Lovecraft, The Mountain of Madness, that never came to be, unfortunately. I'm not a huge Guillermo fan. Are you?
I adore Hellboy 2 way more than most people do. Like, I get crap for how much I love that movie. Interestingly enough, though, I don't really love a lot of his other work. I need to go back and rewatch it, but I remember being kind of underwhelmed by Pan's Labyrinth. I never saw The Shape of Water. But like I said, I will die on the hill of Hellboy 2 being like one of my favorite fun films.
I will say, though, that I feel like Guillermo suffers the same thing I didn't like about this movie, just on a $100 million budget scale or $80 million budget scale versus whatever these guys had, wherein I love the creature effects of, I mean, Pan's Labyrinth is bananas crazy with that shit. And a lot of what Guillermo does succeeds on the effects level. I just never really care about, I mean, even Hellboy, to your credit, but I just don't really ever care about the characters. I think the story suffers. So even their mentors that they were looking up to, I think, kind of fall in some of these tropes that we're going through. But yeah, rewinding it and then, you know, getting back to the story. I'm sorry we went off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I just feel like these guys weren't story guys. These guys are art department guys that decided they were going to go shoot their shot. And in that regard, they succeeded at what they knew, and they, you know, maybe learned some lessons and stumbled along the way with some of the things they didn't. But they decided to just go make this film. You started to go into, they did have an Indiegogo campaign where they raised, $80,000 for creature effects. This is another one of those films like The Endless where I scoured the internet and couldn't find an actual budget.
Yeah.
But
it's not out there. I looked too.
Call it a couple $100,000. Maybe they had $100,000, for regular shit, and then, $80,000 extra they raised for monsters and creatures. But anyway.
Yeah. So, and as we get back to the film, there's also these introductions of these characters, like the older cop that shows up right here. And it's just like Daniel kind of, there is that kind of cool scene where Daniel goes to the bathroom and he kind of has like the psychedelic visions, and we kind of see like the floating triangle stone pyramid thing that's going to show up back at the end. And then we also get those cool quick shots of like the undulating gory masses, and those are all used to great effect. But at the end of the day, it's like, 30, 45 seconds of just kind of quick editing. And then you come back to the story and then things fall apart again. So yeah, all of a sudden there's this sort of older cop there. And then again, with the, the sort of just drops, I think it comes from a misunderstanding. Like in screenwriting, they tell you like, speak to backstory. And I think they understood it conceptually, but not in execution. So, he even says right there, he's like, you've got no bearing on this situation, kid. Your dad would have done so much better. He'd be disappointed in you. And once again, it's like, okay, so now his dad was a sheriff back in the day. And it's like, you just drop these things and move right along all day long. And it really gets dulled. So, but yeah, and then there is a scene where, Daniel wants to call it in because basically he ends up, that nurse that was stabbing the dude in the eye, she cuts off her face. She turns, she goes to attack Daniel. He shoots her. That's what makes him sick. And then he wants to call it in, and they're like, calm down. And he's like, no, we've got to call it in. And so then he goes and runs outside to call it in. And that's where we kind of get our first sense of what's going on outside, where, he goes to the car. He's trying to call it in. The radio is all static. And then we get the giant foghorn blare. Now, Ryan, apparently, just in our watching all of these movies, apparently the foghorn is the official call of interdimensional doom or masses or gods or something, right? All of these films, any time there is a cosmic horror being showing up, it's foghorn, whether it's the Endless or the Lighthouse or the Void. So I just thought that was kind of funny, and more familiar with
definitely.
And
the devil loves a good foghorn, apparently. He's analog.
Right. And then shortly after that, that's where we get another of these white-robed gentlemen. Now, again, Ryan, I understand this is, an indie film here. Am I being overly discriminatory, or were those white robes kind of not threatening at all and kind of stupid? It was.
Yeah. They look like a child's ghost costume with the eye holes and all that shit.
Did.
Except for they have a triangle over the face, for whatever.
It was
an
imitation KKK robe. And for some reason, I also there was a shape of it. It just made me think of the Knight from Monty Python. And again, when that's what you're reminding me of, it's hard to take you seriously as a threat. When, it's like, oh, it's a flesh wound. No, he'll be fine.
I think if there was more payoff with all of this, I would have been a little more forgiving on the costumes and stuff, especially with how cool the monsters and creature designs were. But
kind of. But I mean, they also didn't really let us get a sense of them. They didn't. Some of them looked like they would have been cooler, but some of them were also just really, really dark and obfuscated, which is generally what you do when your makeup effects suck. Yeah. So, but then they raised a bunch of money and used, from what I can tell, basically the same budget on practical creature effects as they spent on the rest of the movie in all respects.
Right.
So, if you're doing that, you better damn well show us those things. So we'll get into that a little bit later here. So, and then, when the white robe guy does attack Daniel, he basically, they have these knives, they're bringing knives to gunfights. So again, it's not that scary. He does end up pouncing on him, gets a little bit of penetration, but Daniel, who again, not a strong dude, kind of chucks him away pretty easily, runs back into the station. And then, I think this is why the film is disappointing, is because every 10 minutes, 12 minutes, you're ready to write this movie off, and then it has some cool little thing that they throw in there where you're like, okay, maybe this is where it gets cool. So right now I'm specifically thinking of that shot after he runs in, and that nurse Beverly that's dead has these crazy furry spider legs coming out of her mouth. It's just this 3-second shot, and you're like, oh, cool. It's going to be awesome. And then
it's on now. Right.
Yeah. And then there is some cool stuff. Daniel passes out. He wakes to the scream from the junkie, and then she turns into this sort of tentacled creature. Right. And I don't know, maybe I've just been spoiled by films like The Thing, which, again, I mentioned I'm not a huge John Carpenter fan, but I love the practical effects from The Thing. And it's when you show us this whole transformation process with the dog and with these crazy creatures, when I get the sort of half-ass version, which, again, I understand financial implications, but it's just not really what I wanted.
Right. I mean, for the budget and for the size of the film and everything, it was suitable. Better than I could have done. You know what I mean? If I was trying to do that shit, I wouldn't have been able to knock it out of the park like they did. So they had some level of experience with makeup and shit. I do agree with you that it was dark and obfuscated and all that for a lot of the effects down the road. There was a bit of a payoff at the end. But again, by then I just stopped caring. So, narratively, I just, it was just visuals at that point, and I've seen better visuals, so whatevs.
yeah. Now, and then speaking of like the way that they just sort of bring in random people, we also then immediately get like the dad and son, we'll just call them. I don't even know if they're related, but it's the guys from the beginning that lit the girl on fire.
By what the fuck these guys were doing there.
Yeah, and they show up and they're they're kind of like the badass guys. Yeah, I don't know, but so apparently it's like I was reading up a little bit after the fact, and they're supposed to, like, it's not very clear, but they somehow know what's going on, and they're kind of like the self-appointed duo that's trying to like fight this evil off, or this doctor dude or whatever. It's not, again, it's really just alluded to in the context of the film.
I have a question.
Yes.
Were they the ones in the opening? I wasn't going to go back and watch it because by the time I shut this movie off. But were they the ones in the opening sequence that shot the girl and were going after the boy and therefore followed him to the hospital to go finish what they started?
Yeah.
So what were they doing in that house in the first place?
And that's what I'm saying is, like, they don't really go into it, but they kind of allude to the fact that, like, these two are like the guys that know what's going on, and they're trying to like stop this ultimate evil thing, right?
Right.
Like, but again, they don't really go into why that is, how they got
Best
together,
I can tell,
any of that.
The cults that we, these guys in the sheets or whatever that are, have pinned these guys in the hospital more or less and surrounded the hospital to keep them in there. And then, I'm not, without getting too far down the road, we'll explain that here shortly. But the best I could tell is the cult in the white sheets have somehow killed their family or the rest of their family or whatnot. And so they're trying to go and eliminate them. The guy that has the needle tracks that was brought in by the cop in the opening sequence, along with the woman that got shot and died, that got lit on fire or whatnot, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time looking for drugs or something. And so
yeah, well, that's apparently how they like lure people into this like sex death cult, is like with, they get like junkies and they're like, hey, we got, we're having a meth sex party back at the house. And people are like, cool, I like meth and sex, let's go. And then they're like, haha, I got you, bitch. It's experiments.
So these two went in to go clean house or something, and go kill, you start to thin the herd, if you will, and get revenge.
Yeah.
And then, in doing so, ran into this couple that we find out later. Again, everything we find out later. Oh, we'll tell you later.
Yeah. Now,
so
it does
don't worry about it.
Yeah. Now, it does set up an important sort of, I guess you could argue it's important, but at least in terms of the end of the film, it's important storyline, which is like the whole thing with the doctor, right? Because the junkie guy ends up holding the pregnant chick hostage, and then the doctor tries to intervene, and he ends up like stabbing the doctor, and then the doctor like dies, but record scratch, he's going to be undead very soon. And, it turns out that this doctor guy is going to be sort of like he's really going to be the ultimate antagonist, which they don't even introduce until like well over halfway into the film, which I think, to your point, is another reason why it's hard to get into, because we haven't, again, halfway through the film, there's no established antagonist, and they're just trying to survive from these robe guys that aren't that dangerous, and these things that may or may not be out there, and
everything's
just,
left so ambiguous.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then, there's the whole part where the pregnant girl is actually going to have her baby. Daniel's elsewhere. And so the Allison nurse, the wife character, is going to go and get the drugs so that they can make sure, because without the drugs, either the baby's going to die or the mom's going to die. So she goes to look for that. That gets her on her own. And then she finally makes it. But then that's where we see the doctor sort of come back to life, right? He's like standing behind her when she's grabbing the different medications and drugs and whatever they are that
you see the bloody sheet that they covered him up with, just laying on the ground, and then they're like, where'd he go? And then, we find out where he went. And now he's with Allison or whatnot.
Yeah,
right.
and then we've got Daniel and the rest of them. They end up going to this part of the hospital that's supposed to be like burned down, and then I think it was something where it's like the Asian nurse was saying that the stairs that were there that they take like weren't supposed to be there. So I guess there's this sort of supernatural element that's kind of going on at the time. And
the cop goes looking for his wife, and then they Scooby-Doo the fuck out of it, wherein they're like, what we should do? The best thing we could possibly do is split up into many small groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's when, we get the scene of after the undead doctor is Allison is basically captured by the doctor, and she's, pinned down or, strapped down to this gurney. And we see the doctor picking apart his own face because I guess that's part of this madness. Again, I don't understand why.
Yeah, kind of an Event Horizon thing going on with Sam Neill a little bit. Like, there are so many homages in this film that are directly lifted from other films.
Yeah.
That it just made me want to go watch those films. Like I said in the beginning, like I appreciated the winks and nods and the homages, but really, fine. I'll go watch Event Horizon. That's a great film. I'll go watch Sword of Illusions or whatever. The Thing. All great films. I like those movies.
Absolutely, yeah. And the funny thing too is actually it reminded me of Cure for Wellness that we did in season 1 early on.
Okay.
Just with regard to the whole thing about how the mad scientist, undead doctor guy has this
Dr.
crazy
Vollmer?
monologue. Yeah, exactly. Well, no, but in this film, the undead doctor, it's the same thing as Vollmer, where he's basically, it turns out that the whole reason that he's doing this crazy sex cult death thing is so he can experiment on people because he believes that he's figured out how to bring his daughter back from the dead. Right? And it was the same thing kind of with Cure for Wellness, like just doing all these different experiments and being sort of undead and like doing it to, bring your daughter back and like it's, yeah. I guess that's something of a
So
trope
if
now.
we're going there already, which, in all fairness, the story for this film could be summarized at about a page and a half, but everything else is just monsters and filler. But if we're going there already, I want to ask you about that. So he has... you've already introduced Allison that the doctor is kidnapped when she went to go look for drugs. There's a pregnant girl that was there at the hospital with her grandfather, who she went to go get drugs for because she's going into labor. So, and the cult has surrounded the hospital. Allison is, put her foot down and told her husband cop, I got to go do this or this baby's going to die. Okay, well, she goes and does it. Again, Scooby-Dooing the fuck out of it. Let's all just separate. And then the doctor kidnaps her because, of course, she gets strapped down to this gurney and the doctor gives her this big monologue and starts peeling his face off while he's explaining about his daughter dying, just as Allison and the cop's daughter, kid or whatever, had passed away during childbirth as well. So in this monologue, he's explaining to Allison, our head nurse, who's now strapped to a gurney, that I can, basically I took from that originally that he was going to use her as the vessel to bring his daughter back through her. And so when you see the belly shifting around and swirling around with whatever monster he's put inside her or impregnated her, I thought, okay, now she's now possessed with this demon or whatever in the way because the doctor wanted to bring his daughter back. And then we find out later that it was the pregnant girl that he was the father of that baby and he's impregnated her in order again to bring his daughter back. So is he just trying to, curse his way out of this dead daughter situation with various women? Or was the Allison thing I'll get your kid back and my kid back? Or why do you have that? Why was that going on in duality? You see what I'm saying? Why was the Allison chick and the other chick both? I feel like he was giving similar monologues for both chicks. I'm going to bring my daughter back and, one way or another. And, I'm like, wait, which one though? Are they both? And then you find out none of them are. It's still some mutant, crazy monster thing that comes out because of course. But I didn't really understand that.
I guess the idea is just sort of demonstrating that he can make her pregnant, right? Even though shortly thereafter, there's a bunch of the tentacles sort of burst out of her body, and then Kirkland, Brand, Kieran Culkin ends up hacking away at it with an axe, and then the doctor's like, oh, see, I made her a mother again. I can do this for you guys, and I can do this for you, Daniel. You just have to submit and kill yourself for some reason. Again, right. I don't understand.
And he walks in and sees her on the gurney, and she's fine. And then all those tentacles, all of a sudden, instant flash, he sees what's actually there because apparently, the good thing was the hallucination, but the bad thing was what was really happening with all the tentacles everywhere over the whole room. By the way, that was a cool shot. I love the tentacle shit with all, coming out of her and everything. That was
and the
really
way they go
dope.
into people's faces and through the eyes.
Yeah,
and through the mouth and stuff like
but
that.
then, like,
that was the good stuff that keeps it
but
from
then
being
she
like a shit movie.
kind of she Brundle flies it, and she like looks at me and she's like, do it, and he's like, all right, and he like straight up axes the fuck out of his wife without any remorse, and like there wasn't much after the fact. He was like almost like, oh, thank God. I finally get to end, like,
Yeah, but no, to your point, like, I couldn't, what was that creature and why did it exist in Allison? Because very shortly thereafter, to your point, his daughter is in the pregnant girl's womb. So what was in Allison's that, like,
unless he was just experimenting on her, to your point about how he could invoke life out of nothing.
That's the only thing I can think of,
through
dude.
possession in the cult, in a build up to him finally finding a vessel to bring his own daughter back. Because we find in the basement as they're going through Kirkland Brand, Kieran Culkin, and the ragtag father and son renegades that we run into in the beginning, they, again, Scooby-Doo off to just the three of them to go wander through the basements in search of Allison and build up to this scene we're discussing. And by the way, when they went down to the scary basement, I thought it was hilarious because there's a warning sign basically saying this portion of this wing is condemned and not safe for public inhabitants. Little yellow sign like you'd get it from a county worker. And in my mind, I'm trying to envision the hilarious scene of a county engineer going down to inspect this fucking horror mansion. I mean, like, we can't have anyone down here, and just sticks up a yellow sign and then puts up some tape and walks away. I'm like, that's bureaucracy at its fucking finest. But then we go down there and there's all these like, crazy half-made monsters and, homages to Hellraiser almost down there, where we find, through a voiceover from the doctor, he's explaining, I think to Allison at this point, who's on the gurney. We're kind of backtracking a little bit to explain. I'm trying to fill in some of the gaps. But he explains to her, I've been doing this for a long time and they want to die and they cannot. I've, and now I'm going to bless you with this and blah, blah, blah. So the only thing I can, kind of get from all of that is he's been working trial and error wise to, meat market and Frankenstein's monster his way through these curses to, or working with the occult to, try to figure out how to manipulate life and failing. And Allison was just another casualty of that, except through her womb. And so leading up to his actual host at the very end of the film that, I guess we'll get to pretty shortly here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to those things that like we do like about the film where, it keeps it from being like a 1 or 2, 1-star film or something like that. The whole thing with like the giant stone triangle and the light emitting and, them like sort of praying to that, like that's a cool shot, like it looked really good, especially for an indie film. Like it was really cool. And then even the birth scene, like it was filmed pretty well. The effects were okay-ish.
Yeah.
With the daughter. And I don't know. I think that, because I'm trying to think about it right now, like, it's not that the effects were necessarily, like, any worse than Dead Alive that we looked at recently, but I guess it was just maybe the tone of the film was such that it couldn't get away with it being a little bit cheesier or something like that, I think that Dead Alive
I think it's just directly
really
the talent of Peter Jackson. I mean, we saw what he went on to do and where he came from. And I think he's just a more capable filmmaker personally, and he's a story guy, and that happened to use effects to tell his story. These are effects guys that use stories to show their effects. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a reverse engineering situation.
Yeah. So, and then, that pretty much is, going to get us to this sort of third act climax and start to wind down on this film, which is, the daughter is born. She emerges from the pregnant girl's torso, and basically, so many of the other people are gonna. She ends up like chasing the dad and the son around, and I think basically, if I remember correctly, it catches the dad, and then the dad like douses himself and the creature in gas and tells the son, like, do it. And then, like,
Right.
he struggles for a minute and he does.
That monster was pretty cool. It was, multi-legged and slimy
Yeah.
and this and that. Had kind of a skull face. And so,
I did like that sort of skull face. But again, I just wish they would have, I feel like they tried to just hide it a little bit too much,
Well,
Like,
and I just didn't care at this point about anybody.
Yeah.
I was so busy trying to figure out why, all these people were there or what they were doing, and everything was so thrown at me. As I was preparing for the podcast, I started to piecemeal some of this stuff together after the fact, just by, taking notes and looking some stuff up. But, that shouldn't have to happen every single time I watch a movie. Like, you should be able to walk away from the film satisfied, and then you go into a deeper dive,
totally.
to get some of these things. But you should be able to walk away at least satisfied or mediocre. But I don't know.
Yeah. And then the way that, the things kind of wrap up is that, Daniel basically ends up, he's in a compromising position. They're in front of this giant triangle of light, and Daniel, like, makes the decision that he's going to, like, push both him and the doctor, like, into that light. Now, we'll get to this in a minute here, but it's the way that with that very last shot with the two of them, with him and Allison standing there, like, what happens to the doctor? Like, apparently Daniel pushes them into this light and the doctor goes away, but he doesn't, or like he's okay. Like, they just kind of disappear.
But then Allison's
Allison's
there for some
too.
reason.
But the
Even
doctor's
after
not,
she
and it's like, what the fuck?
got hacked up with an axe.
Yeah, so it's just like, is the light good? Is the light bad? Where is the doctor? And then the whole thing with also the creature that's being chased, because, basically the son ends up finding the Asian nurse Kim that's kind of just been hiding out, and they're able to escape. And the halls of this hospital are, like, closing in. And I guess that's where they introduce the fact that, like, the burned down part of the hospital isn't supposed to be there. But why all of a sudden does the hospital walls close in?
Kind.
Like, why is that? Why does that happen? Like, what are the rules? And maybe wrapping
Indian
everything
burial
up
ground?
is like, yeah, and maybe that's the thing, is it's like
Poltergeist
the
homage, I don't
rules
know.
aren't consistent, right? That's what we always say about works of fiction, which is you can have the craziest, most batshit rules and physics and magic
Right.
and blah blah blah, whatever the fuck, as long as it's consistent, as long as the rules are understood and they apply to everyone equally. And when you have these moments where it betrays the rules that are set forth, like, those are serious. Like, I remember I had such a huge problem with Willy's Wonderland. I mean, so many problems, but the main one, just with the whole thing where one of the mascots captures the girl and then she's just there the next scene. Like, fine. Like, it kills everything you've established, which is that these things are to be feared because if they capture you, they kill you. Because obviously that didn't happen. And so there's so many of these moments.
It's not even that it's breaking a lot of rules. In a lot of ways, it never set them up to begin with. So
Correct,
you're left
yeah.
to kind of figure out the rules as you go. And again, I can't state this enough. It really is like listening to a 5-year-old try to tell this story wherein they're like, oh yeah, and then also the hospital walls are closing in. You're like, oh, they're closing in? Why? Because something in the basement. But then also there's a monster, and it's like, Jesus Christ, dude! Like, I'm just so stressed out. And the Asian nurse intern that you had mentioned, she's been, like you said, hiding out, but she's also been hiding out from these cloaked figures that have been outside surrounding, keeping them in the hospital, but the cultists. But now they're inside the hospital, and so we keep cutting away to her and trying to hide from them. But they're very they're not very threatening, right?
Correct.
So, like, she's able to avoid them pretty easily for the most part. And so we keep cutting away almost just as, like, to keep the intensity level up. So we go back to the main characters to get some exposition, and then we go back to her to get some, like, build up intensity and suspense, and then back to the main characters for exposition. And so it's this jostling back and forth where you're trying to piecemeal together the story and then figure out why we keep and so, and then nothing is really happening other than monsters bursting out of. So I don't know, man. I just was like,
no,
it was
that's
very
all
inconsistent
100%
to your
valid.
point on tone.
Yeah, and again, they did some good things. They did keep it moving, right? They didn't let it drag too much, and it's competently shot, and it's
right. The score was
decently
decent.
lit. Like, there's, and I guess that's just it's like there's nothing great about it. You know, even the parts that aren't bad are like mediocre or slightly above. And so it's just like, again, you know, if you're like, if you've got, you know, a pie chart of all of the different aspects of a film and you don't do any one of them great, it also kind of doesn't matter if you don't do any one of them super poorly, right? Because now you're just kind of this mediocre vanilla thing that is going to come and
how
go.
about you start with your pie chart with story, plot, and character design, character development, and then flush the rest of the pie out from there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean, technically, there's nothing bad. Like it's competently shot, it's competently acted, the sound is decent. Like you can hear what everyone's saying. You know, it doesn't suffer from a lot of those indie pitfalls that we're accustomed to.
Not at all.
Except for where it comes to the creative elements.
They're technically capable.
The storytelling. Yeah, technically sound, but creatively very undisciplined, very
what's the old adage? You know, the whole is not as good as the sum of its parts or whatnot.
Correct,
you know, it's like that. So
yeah. It's one of those movies, again, you watch, like I said, I adored that trailer that we heard at the top of the episode. Like, if you haven't seen it, listeners, go watch it on YouTube. It's a great trailer. Just watch it afterwards because it might get you a little too excited. Although, if you're still with us and you haven't watched it, I'm sure we dampened that enthusiasm quite a bit by now. But, yeah, so, and then, again, you know, just to wrap things up, the son and Kim escape, and morning comes, so, you know, the cultists are all gone. Son is, you know, rescue, son is
where'd
safety.
They go? So the portal closed and they just went away?
You know,
just don't like morning time?
They don't like
morning
they
people?
don't like the vampire rules. They don't like the sun, man.
I'm just picturing all those cultists going to Starbucks for coffee. They're like, oh, it's been a night, right, Tim? I know, right? Jesus, we got to quit doing this. I know, only Saturdays. You going to work out at the plant? Yeah, I got to punch in at 7.
Yeah, and then we get that very quick epilogue that I guess basically is like the ending of Fight Club, but in like weird space-time continuum place where they're just standing there before this like giant floating pyramid and they grab hands and stare at it as it spins and floats, and then the film ends.
Right. Which is really how I see me and Steve's climax coming to an end.
That is
Steve the monkey and I.
You and that monkey
we're gonna
are
be in
destined
space
for things, dude.
Yeah, and you know,
some
I'm gonna
misunderstanding.
be on
I'm telling you, it's spiraled out of control. It was a simple misunderstanding that's gone so far. Just one beer and you guys would have it settled. I'm certain of it.
Steve, if you're out there, come talk to me, buddy. I think it is. Maybe Jason's right. You know, we'll settle our differences.
You can even hit me up, Steve. I'll work as the intermediary between in the beginning stages to help facilitate this because it's gone on far too long. It's way out of control. All right.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. So that's The Void. And Ryan,
Ta-da.
you know how we like to wrap these things up, you know, with 3 adjectives. And I'm even going to let you continue to have them first because I like a challenge.
Well, I appreciate it. You're a gentleman and a scholar. I am going to go start this one out on a positive note and say ambitious. I thought that, hey, look, they shot their shot. And I thought that there was a lot of things that they did well. This felt like one of my student films that I made in film school where, look, I mean, if you took some of the early work that I've made in my career, you could rip it apart and say, oh, yeah, this guy just wants to... suck.
I was going to say, was it the short film that featured the S&M bondage, or was it the other one that had like the arguable sexual assault?
Regardless,
or was it the other
every single one was an homage to something else. I mean, you know, you're just trying to do with what you've seen before because you know that worked. So, and you want to learn technical stuff. So it's like, well, I'll just lean heavily on what I've seen before and then fill in the gaps with technical stuff because I need to learn that. I don't know what f-stops are. I don't know, how that affects my depth of field and all of that.
Yeah.
So, and lighting and 3-point lighting versus 2-point lighting, all that. So you're trying to learn that. And so you just kind of throw the story away. And I think that, look, this was ambitious on that regard. The second one I'll say is a 2-parter because we love a good 2-word adjective
yes,
here.
We do.
I'm going to call it skimpy ribs. Because there just wasn't a lot of meat on the bone. I mean, at the end of the day, you're having ribs. They're nice and saucy. They look delicious. But they're skimpy ribs, and they're not.
You found a way to reposition not enough meat on the bone, and I love.
Yeah,
you for that,
right.
Dude.
Love a good barbecue. I'm a little hungry. So. And the last one, because this is a Canadian film, if I'm not mistaken, I am going to wrap this up with sorry, because I feel like the whole time, every time I'd come up with a problem, the directors would just kind of nonchalantly wink and nod to me and say, sorry, I'm sorry, eh? And, but hey, the monsters are good, huh? And, that was cool. So, Ambitious, Skimpy Ribs, and sorry.
Skimpy Ribs is also an awesome character nickname. I don't know who or what the character is, but I'm going to write a screenplay with a character named Skimpy Ribs in it. You know what he is?
Go ahead.
I was going to say he's like the skinny nerdy guy in the high school movie about where the kids are trying to get laid. And he's the one that gets picked on the whole time. He's DJ Qualls. He gets picked on the whole time, but he's the first one to get laid.
I was going to say it's maybe from the unmade Badass sequel that we all hoped we could watch one day. He's still on the run, and he's going to seek for help
Badass
from the community. And he starts with his pimp informant, Skimpy Ribs. We're going to go see Skimpy Ribs. And,
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a pimpin' name.
Yeah.
Like he's known for having like really like underweight girls, right? If you like skinny chicks, you go to Skimpy Ribs.
Yeah, or maybe he's just, he doesn't have a good pimp hand. He doesn't keep his pimp hand strong. So,
or he's got a bad copywriter.
Yeah, his bottom bitch kind of runs everything. So, she keeps it down, holds it down for old Skimpy Ribs. Anyway, Jason, I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry you have me on this show as your co-host, Trevor. Jason, what are your adjectives, buddy?
All right, so funny thing, because I kind of almost landed on yours on the first one, but I went a little bit different flavor. I put over ambitious for my first one. And that's basically because, look, man, I understand that there's certain times where it's like you want to shoot for the moon so you can hit the stars, or maybe it's the other way around, however that damn expression goes. Point is, I totally get going for the gusto, but there's also an element of like understanding what you have to work with and being realistic about that. And I think that
you got to know your limitations.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it was one of the first things they taught us in film school, dude, which is produce when you write. If you have not made a single film, if you've never had a screenplay written, don't write $150 million space opera. Nobody's going to make it. Like, you don't have the clout. So much in that same respect, it's like, dude, look, I mean, cosmic horror, you're talking about space. You're talking about creatures. I mean, those are two things that are expensive to do well, right? And
yeah, but they did those well. They just didn't write a good story or character design. That should have been a layup. I mean, if you've got a $100 million mansion, like, oh, I have access to this badass, mansion on this ranch, and I'm going to write a script around it. And the mansion looks cool, but your script sucks. That's not on the mansion. Like, you shot for the moon, yeah, but like all you had to do was write a story around it. You had the hard part. I don't have the mansion. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I feel like they had the monsters because they were art department guys, and they knew all this team of amazing makeup artists and stuff. And because of that, yeah, it was dark. It was obfuscated. They did have budget restraints. They weren't John Carpenter, but at the same token, they did what they could with that. I just feel like, that whatever, you get it. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so carrying forth from that, it should be no surprise to hear that my second adjective is disjointed. And it's just a film that is so all over the place. I won't really expound on that because I feel like we've spent the entire episode explaining why it's disjointed.
Agreed 100%.
And the third one I have is it's forgettable. And it's totally one of those movies like, Ryan, there are certain movies, I think really the last one that I can remember that it really had this effect on me was Zardoz, where it's just like, the moment it's done, I'm like, I can't remember more than like 4 minutes of the movie I just finished watching. And then like the next day I try to think back and it's like, I can only remember 2 minutes of that movie now. And then I'll like have to go and like read these summaries to bring myself up to speed. And then of course there's like that, oh yeah. But inevitably there's also some moments where I'm like, that happened? I don't remember that happening. Did that happen? And then I'll like chalk up my movie file and be like, oh, yeah, that did happen. And it's like, I watched this 24 hours ago. It's not like it's something I'm trying to remember that I watched years ago. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
It's so weird. And this is definitely one of those movies. So
It is.
Overambitious, disjointed, forgettable. Ryan, let's formalize this bitch. How many? Well, no, you don't do the stars. You do the grade rating. What is your grade rating, sir?
Well, this is, this is GoBots to John Carpenter's Transformers. You know what I mean? Like, this is a generic movie. Again, it was ambitious. They did some things all right. I'm really going on a limb here, big ol' limb, and giving it a C-.
That's pretty fair, I think.
I know. A little generous.
I'm gonna go ahead and give it 2.5 stars out of 5.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, a little on the other side of 3, and honestly, even that is just. I mean, I'm giving them an extra half star or possibly quarter star, but at least quarter star for budgetary reasons and taking into account the fact that it is an indie movie. And honestly, like, I mean, I think it's fair to judge it that way, but I also, sometimes, Ryan, I wonder, like, when you're recommending a film to someone, like what are we doing? Are we reviewing the film? Are we giving it a rating because this is like what the film is, like in a vacuum? Or are we giving the film as like a rating of what people should check out? Because here's the thing, man, there's hundreds of thousands of films out there right now that people can go watch, right? Millions even, maybe, right? So like, how do I tell someone, like, yes, you should watch The Void over 100,000 of those films, right, that are probably at least 3 stars or better? And if that's the case, maybe just give it the 2 stars, right? Like, do other people care how much it made? Like, sometimes I go back and forth on that, because I gotta say, this is a 2-star movie for me. I'm giving it 2.5 stars, again, taking that into account. But sometimes I wonder if I should, or if we should just call it a spade a spade.
I know. That is a tough one. It's like Checkers Burger or Rally's, depending on your region. They have good banana milkshakes and pretty solid French fries, but don't eat anything else there ever. What would you rate it? A C-, maybe 2 stars. Are you giving that as a restaurant review on Yelp, or are you just giving it that because you like their banana milkshakes? Well, I have to be specific, and that's what this podcast exists for. I'm not just a rating podcast. I'm a film discussion podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour or so of me talking about The Void to explain why I gave this shitty movie a C-.
Absolutely. So C- from Ryan, 2.5 stars out of 5 from Jason. That's The Void, guys. So, before we get on to selecting the next film here, do just want to go ahead and plug our socials real quick. So we are on the Instagram and the Twitter at Esoterica Cinema. We've got a lovely Instagram page, and our Twitter is quite active. So by all means, hit us up and have a discussion. You can also reach Ryan individually at the Ryan Siebold on Twitter and Instagram. Myself at Jason Aberrant on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, we do have the website live, up and running. The website's awesome. It's not a ton of content, but what we do have on there for you is the master list of films that we have let you know that we have made available for you to check out and follow along here with us. So, Ryan, what do you say we go ahead and get into our next film?
I'd love to, Jason. Let's roll them dice.
Let's roll them dice. So, obviously, this is going to be our 5th film. If you're playing at home, you should have numbers 32, 144, 176, and 188 crossed off the list. It's kind of funny, Ryan, because, these are random number generators, but it's really sort of existed in the back half of that catalog there of our master list. So let's see what happens here. Going to go to our random number generator. Going to generate a number. Dude, we are just literally living at the end of this thing here.
It likes a good back end.
Hey-o, I am a back guy. Oh, this is going to be a fun one, Ryan. I'm pretty sure this one was you, and I'm pretty sure that you have told me time and time again to watch this film, and I haven't, and it's about damn time for me to watch number 186, Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Holy shit, dude. We are just like we're a horror podcast now all of a sudden.
This is literally, I don't know why this keeps coming up, dude. Like, I'm looking at The Wages of Fear, The Thin Red Line, The Taking of Pelham 123, Willow, Redbeard. I mean, there are so many
there's all kinds of crazy
films
shit
on here, and yet, yeah, so this is who we are now, dude. We just do cult horror and sci-fi films now.
Apparently.
Because that's what the gods wants to cover. But you have recommended this to me. I mean, you do love this film, right?
I watched it. I remember loving it. I watched it when it first came out, and I haven't seen it since. But this is Alan Tudyk, and I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's been all over the place. You'll recognize a handful of people in this film. This is from 2010. Listed as affable hillbillies, Tucker and Dale are on vacation at their dilapidated mountain cabin when they are mistaken for murderers by a group of preppy college students, and then they got to fight their way out and whatnot. So we're right back in the woods. We're right back fighting creatures and all of that. Man, I am going to be well-versed in this genre by the end of this podcast. I'll tell you.
I know, right? But hey, hopefully you guys are digging these films. I mean, dude, I love these films, don't get me wrong. And look, I mean, maybe it's an overcorrection because, I mean, season 1 started off with just foreign prestige films, like across the board, right? Whether it was
right.
Lives of Others and Paths of Glory, which obviously isn't foreign, but Solaris. And so, you know, we got some really dramatic, heavy, classic films there early on. And, you know, as we've kind of gone on, we've gotten into Videodrome. But, you know, we followed that up with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. But yeah, so far this season, man, sticking to this genre lane. So, but I'm having a great time doing it, man.
Me too, buddy. Can't wait to watch this. You know, I've been really busy with work and everything too. My schedule's all over the map. So it's been nice to just have these little fun morsels to go dive into and not have to really wrap my brain around any subtitles or anything. This has been great. So I'm looking forward to this one as well. But, you know, I do hope that we get into some dramas and character stuff here soon because as much as we've had more wins and misses, I don't want to push my luck.
yeah, absolutely. We don't want to like live in this lane too much and then kind of, you know, it's like, who knows? Maybe we enjoy The Void more if it's the first film and we haven't just come off, you know, Under the Skin and The Endless. It's hard to say.
This is another hour and a half one, so we'll get through it and be back next week. Can't wait to join you for it.
Absolutely. So, again, listeners, we are going to watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This is a fun one that a lot of people have recommended to me. Hopefully it's as good as they say. Make sure to give it a watch and join us next time on Esoterica Cinema.
Honesty, integrity, accountability. Growing up here, these are just a few of the things I learned to guide me through my life and career in law enforcement. Hi, I'm Jody White, and I'm running a campaign to be your sheriff. Your last sheriff gave up his gun in fear and brought fists to a knife fight. I promised to keep my gun and clean up this town with bullets to spare. Your last sheriff also let demons into our town. Well, I'll fight those demons, just like I fought my own when my wife Cheryl left me 3 years ago for things I didn't do. Our city is overrun by white sheet wearing cultists. Well, my family's been right here for 6 generations wearing white sheets since before. When I'm your sheriff, we're going to clean up that condemned hospital and make our town and streets safe again for our children. Because we don't need a hospital, only the healing power of our Lord and Savior. People say defund the police. Well, I say refund the police. Not like a refund, but like, this is hard. Like, really hard. This is hard, but I am up for the challenge. God damn it. Is it hot in here? We lost our last sheriff through a doorway to another dimension. Well, I say, don't let that door hit you where the good Lord split you. When I'm sheriff, the only portal you need to worry about is the Portal John on 6th Street in McMaster's. It's dirty in there. Some of that was me. People say, don't poke the bear with a stick. But I poked a bear with a stick once, when I was just a kid. It was dead and filled with bees and made a hive in its belly. Those bees got mad and killed my brother outright. They made a movie about it. It was called My Girl. Vote Jody White for county sheriff. Because anyone else can go to hell.
From the imagination of acclaimed author Ashton Macaulay comes the next great American anti-hero, Nick Ventnor, in Whiteout. Nick is a bit of a lush, preferring whiskey to water and bar hopping to exercise. But when a mysterious benefactor hires Nick to find the lost gates of Shangri-La, Nick sobers up just enough to take on the case. Featuring non-stop action and a hilarious wit, Whiteout by Ashton Macaulay is a laugh-a-minute thrill ride that will keep you turning the pages until the very end. Whiteout, available now in ebook, hardcover, and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.